Good evening, Baruchim Habayim Rabotai. Welcome to another edition of our Thursday night's class. Next week, Thursday, Bezrat Hashem, we'll have a class in Yerushalayim Kodesh with the celebration of the Beit Mikdash. If God forbid that doesn't happen, then it's Motzei Tisha B'Av, so obviously there won't be a class. We'll resume the following week, Bli Neder. Tonight's class was sponsored as a result of an interesting situation. Some of you maybe would remember, I wish somebody would have reminded me, that last year, in the middle of the month of Tammuz, by the directive of a few Gdolei Israel, we did this thing that we initially planned on getting 100 people. We wound up getting 200 people. Donated $300 in memory of a great rabbi and a Kabbalist named Rabbi ben Rav Moshe Luan Ashkenazi, the Baal Shem, one of the 9 Baal Shems that existed in history. And many people saw many Yeshuot, to the point that the ones that shared them with me, I kind of kept myself a little personal log of them. And it was very interesting. Normally I'm pretty good with remembering days and yard sites of people and things, and it stays in my mind. And I don't know, Hashem took it away from me this year. Happens to be that his yard site, it's historically argued if it's Chaf Aleph Tammuz or Chaf Zayin Tammuz, but either way, both dates obviously passed. And then the whole thing blew over. I had a lot of other things on my head instead, and the whole thing blew over. And zero recollection whatsoever. This morning, I get 4 or 5 messages in a row from somebody, call me, which is not uncommon in my world, but it kind of means it's urgent. I don't recognize the phone number. It's a phone number from Maryland, not from here. And I call back. I say, hi, it's Yaakov. You texted me a bunch of times. And I hear some boy or man, turns out to be, the other end of the line. It doesn't sound good, and it kind of sounds like he's gasping for air, which I thought this was more of a medical-oriented question. I was going to tell him, what are you calling me for? Call 911. You don't sound good. And he tells me, I had a scary dream last night, and I need to talk to you about it. And I'm like, first of all, we don't say about dreams that they're scary. Chazal clearly say, the way you explain a dream is the way it's going to be. So we always say, Chalmat tava chazit, you saw a good dream, everything's good. There are halachot of Ta'anit Chalom in specific situations, but beyond that, we always explain things in the optimistic way. I said, but what's so on top of your mind? So he said, you remember last year there was a rabbi, he didn't even remember the name, that we did something for, and I gave you $300 for charity in memory of that rabbi? I said, oh my God, you're right, yeah, that was 2 weeks ago. It's a year, 2 weeks ago. He's like, well, you got me into trouble. I said, I got you into trouble? Okay, I've been blamed for a lot of things in my life. What did I do this time? So he says, I promised last year that if my thing that I wanted works out, then the following year, on the day of his memorial, I'm going to give another $300 to say thank you. And it worked out for me. And I totally forgot about it. And I didn't do it. And I was kind of assuming that being that you had an extremely successful situation last year, that you would send out a message and that's what I would bank on. That's why I didn't even put in a reminder. I guess he's one of the organized ones that puts in reminders a year ahead. And he says, and last night I was sleeping, and my brother who passed away, this guy tells me, came to me in a dream, and he says, why are you messing with righteous tzaddikim in Gan Eden? You made a promise, you better stick to it quickly. The tzaddik's not happy now. And he says, and he used words that I can't repeat, but I'm all shaken up, and where do I send the money to? I said, listen, last year was designated for a very specific thing, and this year I totally forgot about it, and whatever. He says, don't worry, I got to get this off my conscience. So I said, all right, so sponsor tonight's class for us. Let's start with that. And he immediately obviously did it. And then I asked him about his life, because when I hear stories like this, honestly, most situations I kind of suspect that maybe it's somebody who lives with hallucinations. A lot of people hallucinate, they hear voices, they hear this, they dream things. It scares me a little bit, these type of stories. So I interrogated a bit in a friendly way. What do you do for a living? What is it? Turns out he's a doctor. He's extremely well educated. Person with a very nice career and a beautiful Jewish family, and a lot of sanity in his life, not a lot of insanity in his life. So I see that this thing had meaning. And at that point, I felt guilty myself. I was like, no. Why did I lose the merit to be the facilitator of the same thing again, or to do another good deed again? So at least the Torah that we learned tonight should be Lilu Nishmato, and better late than never, they say. So I decided that instead of our regular Tisha B'Av thing that we do, which is normally for Kalot, unfortunately in Israel now due to COVID, not many weddings will be happening in the next month. So even though normally from Yud Aleph Av until a week before Rosh Hashanah, we try to sponsor our wedding every night. I'm not sure that there are many weddings to sponsor in Israel right now. So instead, we'll go back to our Rav Eliyahu Baal Shem charity fund 2 weeks late, and we'll hope that it'll be a zchut in Shamayim, better late than never. But I found that to be a very shocking story, that somebody would in this generation would merit to have a dream of a deceased person. That means that his brother must have been a really holy person as well, to have the merit to come from Shamayim to tell him such a thing, and to say so clearly. Yeah, why are you upsetting rabbis in Gan Eden when you made a promise? Stick to it. Which also shows the importance of sticking to your word. Motzas fatecha tishmo. It's better not to promise anything than to promise something and not stick to it. You're a lot better off not saying anything. Don't say anything. You don't have to commit. People call me on the phone all the time for charity. So unless I have a credit card in my hand that they'll charge that second, I never say a pledge. Because what if I forget? Well, it's better not to say and do than to say and not do. Chazal teach us that the righteous, they speak little and do a lot. The opposite of the righteous, like Bilam, they talk a lot and they do very little. I think that's a rule in life in general. The more you talk, the less you do. Men of action don't speak much because they don't have time to talk much. There was a great, great rabbi who I had the merit to be raised literally in his home. We shared a house until I was 12 years old. His name was Rabbi Mordechai Schwab. Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh Livracha. He was Rav Shimon Schwab's younger brother. Rav Shimon Schwab was more famous for some reason in America. These two brothers had the merit to see the Chafetz Chaim. Very few people could say they saw the Chafetz Chaim. Very holy man on many fronts. And once, I was a child, I don't know, maybe 10, 11 at the most, but I remember this clearly. Rabbi Schwab was an extremely soft-spoken person, naturally. He rarely spoke over a whisper. It was very hard to hear him. Because he said, Chazal say, Divrei Chachamim benachat nishmaim. Wise men speak quietly. I know in the public speaking world, those who scream loudest are the ones who are considered the good speakers, and wow, they're so energetic and whatever. Unfortunately, I'm not sure how much chokhmah there is there. Divrei Chachamim benachat nishmaim. If you're a chacham, you can speak in a monotone way and people will listen to you for your intelligence, not for your show business on stage. And to turn the Torah into show business is really disgracing God. But one way or the other, I once remember him not raising his voice as in yelling, God forbid, but like the way we would normally speak, say hello to each other. For him, that was called raising his voice. One time I remember in my childhood. And there were two gentlemen. One of them was my dad and one of his friends. And they went into him and they said they want to have a meeting about a specific subject that was going on then in the local Orthodox Jewish community. And Rabbi Schwab stood up and he raised his voice a little bit, and I was there, I was the tag-along. And he said, no meetings. Everyone was shocked. I was very out of character for him. And then he settled down and sat back down. He said, let me explain you why. I'm already an old man. And he held his beard. He said, look, there's not even one gray or black hair left. It's all white. And I sat in hundreds of meetings in my life with the wisest and the greatest in all areas. And nothing ever came out of a meeting other than scheduling another meeting. So how do meetings conclude? Let's meet in another month to further discuss the subject. Our whole political system discusses things for 4 years until they discuss who's the next president, to discuss things for 4 more years. That's the way the world runs. Because nothing comes out of meetings. If you want to get something done, it doesn't take many words. Action, quick. A, B, C, boom, done. Bingo. Problem solved. And that was a great lesson that he taught me. The 9 days are a time that people in general speak less. They're more monotone, each one for his own reason. Some for very pure reasons. Tsar of the Chuban Beit Hamikdash. They feel God's pain of most of his children not affiliated with him. And not affiliated is not only level of observance in Judaism. Not affiliated means don't love him. And don't feel that he loves them. That's the greatest non-affiliation. Those were very holy people. I had a grandfather like that. Year-round, he would sit on the floor every night, even when he was over 100 years old, and read Tikkun Chatzot for over an hour in bitter tears. It was frightening to see. Anybody who saw it even once walked out a changed man, because he saw what it means to care. But I don't know if we're on those levels right now. To us, the 9 days normally is planning our vacation. It's 9 days, there's no meeting, we don't go out as much, the Ashkenaz don't go swimming, there's more time, so what do? We plan our summer vacation. That's more or less where the 9 days is. And that's a good time for the sushi places to make extra money, you can't eat meat, so 9 days menu, and that's roughly what's left to it. And then on the rabbinic end, you get like a million questions, do I have to fast, do I have to fast? My response this year is, before I answer you, I want to know, do you want to fast? Does the fast even have any meaning to you? Do you see any point in fasting? But that's roughly what it became to. And it's very unfortunate. I say that with a lot of pain. And this is the whole point. This is a bonding time with God. And instead of bonding, we're like kind of doing things different. But we can't be blamed. It's not our fault. It's very simple why. If you never drank scotch in your life before, I happen to be an avid scotch drinker. And I'll explain you what an expensive scotch is for 4 hours straight. Will you really understand what it tastes like? No. But all I got to do is give you a glass and you taste it. You may not have such a developed taste for it, so you may not get the full pleasure out of it, but at least you'll know what we're talking about at that point. When there was a Dol De'ah that saw God clearly, and saw prophecy clearly, and saw greatness clearly, so that Dol De'ah had an easy time relating to the loss of the temple, and relating to Tzar HaShekhinah. When we got to a point that our worries in life is the color of our shoes, which is also important, by the way. I'm not saying it's not. If that's what makes you feel good, Hashem wants people to feel good. But that's normally on the top of the priorities. So then Tzar HaShekhinah is definitely has nothing to do with anything. And we can't be blamed, because we don't even know what we're missing. If you know what you're missing, you could be sad that you're missing something. If you don't know what you're missing, then the most evil thing you can do to a poor man is show him a luxurious lifestyle for 5 days and then take it away from him. There's nothing more evil in the world than that. Because if he lived his whole life in poverty, that's what he knows. So God forbid it's tragic, but at least when he eats bread and butter, he doesn't feel like he's tortured. But once you wine and dine them with the finest things, you may have meant well, but unless you're willing to sustain that, what'd you do? You killed him. The Gemara says if somebody was rich and he was used to a luxurious lifestyle, and then lo aleinu v'lo alechem nobody should ever know lost all his money, then in Chutz Taka we're obligated to support him on the level of a rich man, not his minimum needs. Because at that point it's a tzorech hanefesh, it's what the soul needs. And without that he won't be able to function. It can cause him mental, physical, and emotional harm all combined. We don't know what the temple was. We weren't there. Maybe our souls were there. If we think we're reincarnations. According to Rabbi Chaim Vital, our souls definitely were there. But beyond that, we don't really know what the temple was. So we don't really know what we're missing. So at that point, it can't really be expected from us to relate to it much. What do you want? Can a child say, I miss my dad so much if his dad died before his mother gave birth to him? No, he never met his father. He doesn't miss nobody. He misses the idea of having a father. That, yeah. But beyond that. So in the olden days, Hashem wanted from Am Yisrael that they should care about the third temple. Today he wants us to care that one day we should understand why we should care. That's also a step. Some people want things. Some people, all we expect from them is that they should want to want. We're still in the category of people that Hashem wants us to want. That's also a good step. This Shabbat is an interesting Shabbat. Shabbat before Shabbat, it's titled Shabbat Chazon, named after the Haftarah. If you look in the Haftarah in this week's Shabbat, it says a little bit harsh words. Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amos. Yeshayahu ben Amos had a prophecy, a vision, and he writes very strong words there about the Jewish nation. And I choose not to quote them. If you have a strong heart, read it and understand it on your own. But the day I'll be righteous is the day I'll quote things like that. But until then, I'll plead the fifth. But I'm an eternal optimist, or at least I try to be. I try really hard to be. And in that prophecy that seems to be the attack of the Jewish nation, of God saying, where are you and why? There is another perspective. Not only is there another perspective, it may be the only real perspective, and the rest might just be a cover for this. Rabbi Yitzchak Mibaditchuv, Rabbi Yitzchak Misarasasha, Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh Livachas Chutay Yagen Aleinu, writes in his Torah in this week's parasha, unbelievable words, and that's where the title of tonight's class came from. He said that if a person, chazon, means a vision, to see. He said if a person has a merit, on this Shabbat, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives the opportunity to each and every Jew in the whole nation to see the third temple. And at that point, when it comes to Tisha B'Av, you know what you're mourning for, you know what you're looking forward to, you know what you're yearning for when you pray that B'nai Yerushalayim, God builds Jerusalem, because you have a vision of it. Rabbi Yitzchak didn't exaggerate. If he wrote it, that means it's literal. We didn't see it. So the problem's by us. We weren't wearing the right glasses. So maybe if tonight we fix our glasses a little bit, then this week we'll be able to see the third temple. But he says a parable. Comes to Kedushat Levi and he says there's a father that loves his son. And he wants him to have nice things. So his son's birthday is coming up and he goes and he spends a lot of money and he buys him a very expensive piece of clothing. Now buying children expensive clothes definitely doesn't benefit the child in any way. A lot of times it benefits the mother. When she walks to shul with them on Shabbat, she could show off, wow, my kids are all dressed in Armani and Burberry. But that's the immaturity of the mother. That's not benefiting the child in any way. If anything, that's raising a bar to a kid that he may not be able to sustain in life and destroying him in advance. But his father didn't think that far, and he's like, it's my son's birthday, I love him, whatever, let me buy something very expensive. He goes, he buys him an expensive suit. Another thing that's unfair about buying kids expensive clothes is if you just spent $8 on sale on Gap on your son's pants and he went out to play basketball Shabbat afternoon and ripped them, you don't really care. But if you just spent $300 on your son's pants and he went out to play basketball and you ripped them, your heart just ripped with it. And normally you let it out on him. So first you imposed on him luxury clothing, and then you fought with him. How is that fair? That really doesn't make sense. And that's what goes with my rule that I say in all the classes. And I'm sure many of you heard it from me countless times. If it's going to upset you, if it gets ruined in your house, don't buy it, because that means you can't afford it. If you're going to buy a couch and now your kids can't jump on it, don't buy it. You're ruining their life, you're ruining your life, and you can't afford it by default. Because if you would be able to afford it, you know if it gets ruined, I'll buy another one, or reupholster it. Same thing in everything in life. I have a friend that taught me a great thing once. I think I said this once in a class. I bought a new car, it was a nice car, and it literally got delivered from the dealer. I didn't even see it yet, and he sent me a picture of my car keyed. And he said, I did it. If you want money, let me know, I'll pay for it, but I think I'm doing you a favor. And he's a very rational person, and I called him and I said, what were you thinking? And he said, I just want to save you aggravation Friday afternoon when you go to Gourmet Glatt and somebody bangs a wagon into your car and you get your first scratch. So I did it already. And the best part is when you have to return the lease and it'll cost you money, I'll pay you to fix it then. And now you have 3 years that you can enjoy your car. It's a great idea. When I got my last car, I told the dealer to let somebody else use it for for the first 500 miles. After it gets the first dent, then I want it. I don't regret that decision. It was a great decision. I had peace of mind. Scratch more, scratch less. The world doesn't come to an end. This dad goes, buys his son an expensive car. Child is a child. He goes out to play. Sure enough, day one, destroyed. He doesn't get upset at him. He's a good father. He's like, I bought it for him. Got ruined. The kids are kids. Goes and buys him another one the next week. I'm going to tell you a mind-boggling story about people that behave that way. I have a set of grandparents that aren't alive for many years on my father's side. And on my mom's side, I have a set of grandparents, lahavdil, may God give them a long life, that are still alive, currently living in Israel. My mom's dad is a Holocaust survivor who saw 11 of his brothers and sisters being killed in front of his eyes, and still stayed normal and built up a beautiful family and generations. And my grandfather, on one of his trips to Israel, prior to going to Israel together with his wife, bought my grandmother, his wife, an extremely expensive watch as a gift. She's a very non-materialistic person. She made a mockery of it. Like, she was very thankful, but she also said, come on, you should. And then every time he bought a jewelry, she would always say the same thing. No, at least when I die, the kids will have something. That was her attitude always. These were real givers. They wanted nothing for themselves, just for the kids and for the grandchildren. Everything, give. They take an El Al flight to Israel. And my grandma went to bed. And when she fell asleep, I don't know if she took the watch off. At an older age, sometimes you don't really remember what you do clearly 100%, or whatever she did, and she misplaced the watch. And the flight was over, and she realized the watch is gone, and I don't want to say what it cost, but trust me, very expensive. Very expensive on jewelers' terms too. And she panicked. And my grandfather told her, don't worry about it, whatever, nobody did anything purposely. But the El Al staff are extremely friendly in situations like that, for sure. In time of need, Jews come through for each other. And they're premium flyers as well, and whatever. So, combination of the two, they took the plane apart. Literally took the plane apart. Just the seat, and the this, and the mechanism of the bed, and that, everything, just to see maybe it fell, maybe it slipped off, maybe. Nothing doing. My grandfather, with his great wisdom, while they were doing all of this, realized he has an opportunity. He turns to her and he says, listen, it's a long flight, we're not young people, let's leave, they'll find it, and they'll send it to the house already. And he looks at the flight attendant and he tells her, yeah, I can give you my information. She says, yeah, sure. Gives him a phone number. Gets to his apartment in Jerusalem and picks up the phone and calls one of his grandchildren and says, listen, here's a certain model number, here's a name, and here's a credit card number. Make sure you get a hold of this watch in the next 60 minutes. Don't argue the price, just get it. And then he says, and make sure grandma doesn't find out. Call me when you have it. He went and bought the identical watch, and then faked receiving a phone call from El Al saying they found it on the airplane, and gave her the watch. Hopefully, my grandma, you don't watch YouTube because I'm going to be dead for this. Just so she should never know. I meant that, by the way. I could be in a whole lot of trouble tomorrow. Just so she should never know that she lost the watch or feel bad. That's called loving someone. Not only will you cover up for their flaws, you will make them feel they never happened, to the point that they will be completely convinced of it, even though it's the farthest thing from the truth. So while we say Chotamo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Emet, God's seal is truth, sometimes that truth is the greatest lie. That's when God, Kaviyachol, lies to himself every day that the Jewish nation is perfect, even though we're far from it. Because a father who loves his child is biased to see the good in him. And one who loves their spouse is biased to see the good in them. And one who loves their friend is biased to see the good in them. Going back to last week's theme, one who loves Am Yisrael, lo yibit aven b'Yaakov, v'lo ra'a amal b'Yisrael, Hashem Elokav imo. We only see the good in other Jews. Because we're biased. And that's a beautiful lie. A beautiful lie. It's a very precious one. Comes to Badicheva and says, after the second time he buys him this expensive suit, it rips again. Now he's like, okay, so what are we going to do? So he goes to his son and he tells him, listen, here's a third suit, but I'm asking you nicely, this time don't destroy it. And if you're not ready to wear it because you think you want to go out and play and whatever, so keep it in the closet and when you're ready, take it. Rabbi Yitzchak said that's the mashal. The nimshal is God gave us a great gift, the first temple. But we were kids, and over stupid things we destroyed it. Went and gave us the next gift, the second temple. And once again we were kids, and over stupider things we destroyed it. Baseless hatred. What can be dumber to destroy a temple over baseless hatred? Baseless. That's it, just stop there. Everything you did to yourselves as a nation is baseless, God says. For nothing. Over what? God didn't say, okay, I'm done with you. He said, okay, here's the third temple. You know the difference between the first and second temple and the one that we're going to have shortly? There is a contradiction in Chazal about this, but at least the way we were taught as in school, that the third temple is going to come down from heaven in fire. The first two had to be built. This one's coming down ready. There is a stira in Chazal, because Chazal clearly say that we're not mevatel tinokot shel Beit Rabban from their learning in order to build the third temple. That's the importance of children learning. So I don't know how those two things coincide. That's a subject on its own. There's a wonderful sefer by Rav Steinemann called Oil Moshe on Churban Beit Hamikdash. He has a very long piece to explain that. We'd be here until next week if we tried to just quote what he brings down there. But one way or the other, the reason why the third temple is not being built by us is because God says it's ready already. It's right there. I'm just keeping it in the closet. Whenever you want it, take it. Whenever you feel ready for it, take it. So the first two I did on my rules. My rules didn't work out. You weren't able to deal with it and they got destroyed. This one I'm doing on your terms. When you feel ready to accept the third temple, then you'll accept it. And that's really what it means to see the third temple. Comes to Badicheva and writes, on Shabbat Chazon, the Navi writes, Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amos, Chazon, see. See that the third temple's right there, you could see it. You can relate to it. And it's so accessible and it's so easy to get. Just do it. Just be open to it. Just be open to accept it. But one of the things we know in psychology and in parenting and in other areas is one of the most harmful things you can do to somebody is feed into bad habits or negative attention. Because now you taught somebody that by behaving in a negative way, they're going to get attention and you destroy their life in simple English. That's why sometimes you can't feed into bad habits, even if it's hard to hold back. Not sometimes, all the time. So, here comes the interesting situation. Belel Zeif Kayun. We say in the keynote, on Tisha B'Av, so many years, Am Yisrael sat on the floor and cried. We cry for many reasons, or as a result of many things, I should say. One of them is Atem Bechitem Bechiyah Shel Chinam, because we cried once for no reason, by the Chet HaMraglim, and now we're going to have a Bechiyah Shel Dorot, a 1950 year of crying. But then there's another reason in Chazal. Chazal say that it goes all the way back to Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu went and stole the blessings from Esav. When Yaakov stole the blessings from Esav, Esav cried. He cried 2.5 tears. I'm not sure what a half a tear means. I never understood this. I guess it's a parable. What does it mean, a half a tear? I don't know. But whatever that means. And Chazal say if he would have cried a third tear, like a full tear, then God forbid there would be no Jewish nation as a result. That's how far it would go. Frightening words. If you think about it, it's very frightening words. But I have one question. Yaakov caused Esav to cry 2.5 tears. Till today, we're crying. Any suffering that happened in Jewish history was all a result of that. How is that fair? We cried trillions of tears. I don't know what number you could possibly put on it. Just think about World War II alone. You don't have to go that far back. How many tears were shed? So he cried 2.5 tears, and now we're crying forever? Like, how does... Our tears should have wiped out his tears 20 trillion times over years ago already. This is a question that many Sfarim ask. Amongst them, Rabbi Shlomo Levenstein in his Sefer Umatoka O brings it down in the name of Ben Sion Ramotcha Pogomansky, who brought it down in the name of another rabbi, which I forget his name. And he says a very, I don't know, somewhere between frightening and unpleasant answer. Very out of character for me to quote. But there's a lot of truth to it, and sometimes you just got to say it as it is. He says the difference between Esav's tears and our tears were, when somebody's sitting on the floor in Shabbat saying keynote and he's crying. And you tap him on his shoulder and you catch him off guard and you say, what are you crying for? So if he's aware, so he's going to tell you the Beit Mikdash because that's good lip service. But if he's not aware, he's going to tell you, I didn't pay my mortgage in 3 months. I have other problems. I have medical issues. I have fights with people. I have the bank chasing me. I have this one. I hate my boss. The Beit Mikdash has nothing to do with it. Not only that, when people are having a good time in life and life is good, they say, God, right now we don't need the Beit Mikdash. You know, put it off a few weeks. First, let me finish my trip. When I come back from my vacation, then Mashiach should come. One of my acquaintances told me that he was going for the 9 days to Cancun. So I asked him, what happens if Mashiach comes while you're in Cancun? So he told me, don't worry, when I put on tefillin this morning, I prayed that he should wait until I get back. I told him, I'm embarrassed to be associated with you. Are you that self-centered? That all you think about is yourself? And are you that removed from anything that symbolizes anything Jewish? Like, that's the extent you went to? At least say, God says, I'll konfein sharim esayitchem. He'll pick me up from Cancun, fine. But everybody else doesn't count. Right now, what I want to do, that's the only thing that counts. Oh, guess what? What you want to do is not what's important to God right now. Or to anybody else for that matter. And it shouldn't be important to yourself. You know, it's interesting because in the Ashkenaz world, some have a custom, and I stress, we don't have this custom, don't with capital letters, that on Shabbat Chazon, this week's Shabbat, they don't wear Shabbat clothes. They wear weekday clothing. Some sort of mourning. You have to understand, and many other people in Am Yisrael do otherwise, the majority of Am Yisrael, and it's always associated with the Hasidim. They dress regular and sing regular and do everything regular on Shabbat Chazon. That's the greatest ignorant mistake in halacha, because in Tafkuf Nun Aleph Sif Dalid, so Maran writes in Shulchan Aruch an opinion not to wear Bigdei Shabbat on Shabbat Chazon. And who's the one who says that no way you can't do that and you have to wear regular Bigdei Shabbat and have a normal Shabbat? The Gra, the Gaon Mivilna, the head of the Lithuanian movement. We got things like, sometimes people quote and it's so off, like get the facts straight. But anyway, it's an interesting Shabbat. On one hand, you read an haftarah that's very harsh and it's like kind of a wake-up call type situation. On the other hand, it is Shabbat. Not only it is Shabbat, the only thing that's going to bring Mashiach is Shabbat. So it's a day of Simcha and everything. These things always seem contradicting, and in Judaism we have so many contradictions like this, or paradoxes, we should call them. I think the greatest that we talk about every year is what Rav Nachman writes, to say kinot, or to mourn for the temple, is a mitzvah. And a mitzvah you have to do happy. How do you mourn happy? Doesn't sound like it makes sense, no? You're doing a mitzvah you have to do with simcha. How do you mourn happy? It's an interesting thing. Nachman has a big Torah about this to explain this. It's not so simple. The There were communities that even had a custom that there is a pasuk that says Echa esa levadi in the parasha this week, Tochachem umasachem v'rivchem. So being that on Shabbat people read Megillat Echa, they read that pasuk Echa. I guess they make some Gzerah Shava or something, and they read it with the tune of Echa. In Mechilat Kvodam, it's disrespect for the Torah and for Shabbat. So I'm not sure where that came from, and I know people are going to say it's a custom. A lot of customs, I don't know where they came from. And if it's brought down on the poskim, great, but they would have to explain it, why and how. But one way or the other, and we don't do that, so it's not applicable for us. But there is a parallel, there is a deep meaning over here. And it's a Midrash. This Midrash I didn't know myself. Later on, when I told it over to people looked at me like I'm nuts. It's like such a famous Midrash, how didn't you know this? But I didn't. It's a Midrash in Echa. I read the Midrash in Echa many times. Must have missed this. But Baruch Hashem, a wonderful friend of mine from Eretz Yisrael, did me a very big favor and got me a sefer that I was looking for a while because it was been out of print, called Noam Siach. And it came to my house yesterday. And in that sefer, he quotes this Midrash. So it opened my eyes to a Midrash that I missed. So I have a big hakarat tov to my friend who I know is going to watch this tomorrow. Izzy, thank you. And to this rabbi who brought this wonderful Midrash to my attention. The Midrash is in Echa, in the preface of Echa, in Yud Aleph. Ilu zachitem, God tells the Jews, if you would have had the merit, ha'item korim Echa esa levadi. You would have read the pasuk like we read in the parasha, Echa esa levadi. Achshav shelo zachitem, but now that you didn't have the merit, atem korim, you read Echa yashva badad. Megillat Echa. Echa yashva badad means how could it be that we sat alone? Loners. Loneliness. Lichora, this Midrash seems a little bit funny, no? Also, it sounds like the source of this Echa Echa thing. If you had a merit, Echa. If not, then this Echa. What does that mean? What's this Echa Echa game over here? The truth is, we think about it, amongst people, we have exactly this situation. We said the 9 days, unfortunately, has become dedicated to planning vacations. So there are two types of people that go on vacation. One travel agent gets a phone call. Well, now we don't use travel agents anymore, but in the days that we did, one travel agent gets a phone call and his client tells him, listen, I want to go on vacation for 5 days. Find me a place that there's nobody there. A cabin on top of a mountain. I just need my quiet. Leave me alone. So he sends him, I don't know where, maybe to the top of Mount Everest. Oh, there's plenty of Israelis, so it's not so lonely. But whatever, somewhere or the other. I didn't want to say the other quote that's very common. Send me to a place that has no Jews. Do you really hate the Jewish nation that much? And then another person calls a travel agent and tells him, I want to go on vacation. Where do you want to go? Somewhere action-packed. I want to go hang out, people, fun. They're both going on vacation, but everybody's definition of vacation is something else. To one, a vacation or a good night out is a night that you came home deaf and dizzy and blind, and otherwise known as a heavy metal concert. And to the other one, a definition of a night out is a night that you sat out quietly and read a book on the couch. If you're curious, I belong to the second category. But I'm in the minority group. And the proof is how most of the U.S. right now is stressing out over the lack of nightlife. So obviously everybody needs to have a lot of lights and noise in their head. It's like almost a mitzvah to come out deaf. You went to a wedding and people come out and they say, what a fun party. That means there was a DJ that had lights that for sure blinded you and that you couldn't hear a thing even if you tried. And preferably a permanent hearing damage as well. The DJs put the music like that because they're deaf themselves after so many years. So they just don't hear. It's like the Stipler used to yell, Avdil Elefafei Avdalot, because he didn't hear. That's it. So we see this amongst humans, that there are different types of things. Now one who who loves himself and likes being with himself and sits alone on the couch and reads a book. Is he suffering? No. He's in a great state of mind. He's in the best place that he could be. To the person who always needs noise around him, if he'd be doing that, he'd be suffering. Meaning loneliness is a very technical term, and it depends on a person's personality and makeup and denial and escape and a long list of other factors as well. Why am I saying this? Because now we can start getting a glimpse into what the Midrash says. Are the Jews a lonely nation? Are Jews loners? So instinctively we would say, no way, we're the most community-oriented that could be, right? We go to shul and we have our own schools and everything's social, and our neighbor knows better than us what we cooked for breakfast this morning, and it's unbelievable, right? Now in the summer, when a big part of the Jewish nation in New York is in upstate New York in the bungalow colonies, if you need eggs in the morning, you don't even have to ask. You just open your window, it's close enough to stick your hand into the other window and take your eggs from her counter. You live in each other's guts. Over here, in some circles, I know kids that are married and live in their parents' houses. They don't even have their own house. There's no, it's a lifestyle. So we seem to be as community-oriented as could be. People do everything together. Our weddings are, I have an extremely wealthy non-Jewish partner who's made a wedding for a child, I'm talking about pre-COVID era. And he was telling me months in advance what a large wedding he's making. And I'm thinking 2,000-3,000 people at least, with the amount of, just for clients and associates and whatever. The large wedding was 300 people. If in Lakewood there would be a wedding of 300 people, there would be WhatsApps going out, please come to a mitzvah wedding emergency. 300 people? What's 300 people? I'm not talking about for dinner to make expenses. Thank God in our town we don't cause other people to have expenses. You come afterwards, simchat chatan v'kala, to make the chatan and kala happy. So it seems like we're a very social nation. Go to Israel. You walk into a taxi in the airport. The guy doesn't know you, never met you before in your life. What's the first thing he tells you? Boker tov achi. Good morning, my brother. What do you mean, brother? I don't know you. Who are you? That's the way it is. You walked into the bank and the bank clerk took your deposit. Yom tov motek shiri. Have a good day, sweetheart. Sweetheart, I don't know you. What sweetheart? We're a warm nation. We're an affectionate nation, at least in theory. Yeah, that's what it seems like, no? That's a very shallow analogy of the Jewish nation. When Bilam was looking, and Bilam, remember, is coming from a level of prophecy that according to Chazal was greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. The highest level of prophecy obtained by man. Unfortunately, he used it for tragic things, but he had the highest level of prophecy obtained by man. Lo kam Israel ki Moshe od. Amongst the Jewish nation, there was no prophet as great as Moshe Rabbeinu, but be'umot ha'olam kam. In the nations of the world, there was Bilam. When Bilam in his prophecy describes the Jewish nation, he describes them as loners. Hein am levadad yishkon. They're a nation that's alone, that lives alone. Ubagoyim lo yitchashav. They don't pay attention to their surroundings. They're not they don't integrate with the nations around them. Bilam's analogy of Am Yisrael was loners. We know loners to be a medical condition. So, what? So we're all sick? What does this mean? There got to be a deeper meaning to this. So look in Rashi and many other Rishonim over there, and they all write the same thing, each one with his wording, so I'm just going to give the general glimpse of it. Rashi writes that this bdidut, this loneliness, is an inheritance that we got from our forefathers. Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov already stuck it into our DNA. Why? Because it preserves the value and the quality of Jewish life. Otherwise known as, it's an assimilation preventive. Not only that, Rashi also says that it's a protection mechanism that our enemies should never be able to destroy us. Based on this Rashi, we understand the DNA of the Jews. Amongst each other, we're extremely warm and achi and motek sheli and this and that, and we loving everybody and giving everybody and helping everybody and throwing huge parties and inviting the whole world. But outside of our comfort zone, God did us a favor and put it into our DNA that we should not succeed. Because if we did succeed, there'd be nothing left of the Jewish nation. Everybody would assimilate. And historically, every time, you know what, I'm going to say something a little bit politically incorrect. I'm entitled once in a while. If somebody finds himself walking in a jungle and he feels very at home, is that somebody you want to be acquainted with? I wouldn't, because if you relate to monkeys, then you are a monkey. Leave me alone. If somebody walks into a jungle and he thinks it's beautiful, it's fascinating, God's creation, but he doesn't associate with it, then okay, thank God. That makes you normal. If the world became a jungle and we feel at home, we better reassess our value scale very, very, very good quickly. If the world became the jungle that it is and we feel very uncomfortable and not at home, then we know, Baruch Hashem, we're blessed, we're a blessed nation, that there's still something left to us. Comes Rashi and writes, the greatest compliment Bilam was able to give the Jews in prophecy was Heinu am levadad yishkon. They don't feel comfortable in their surroundings. That's a healthy loner. But within themselves, they feel very comfortable. They're the most warm, loving, giving nation that could be. And it's not, God forbid, to say that mankind is not important, and we believe in helping all of mankind and doing a lot for mankind at large. B'tselem Elohim barat Adam, God created everyone in His image, and every human deserves respect. We spoke about that last week and for many weeks now. But at the end of the day, there is a certain home feeling. Right? Even Elul, when it was open, and hopefully it will reopen again. And then the reason why I say hopefully it'll reopen, I don't believe that Israel needs a national airline. Who cares? But whatever's more economical and better service really is what should be. But there's an interesting thing going on. I hope it goes through. Elul's right now financially considering themselves bankrupt, and there's a gentleman who's about to buy it, and he's a 31-year-old yeshiva boy. Wouldn't that be cool that the airline that wanted to open on Shabbat and that the non-religious put all these fights up about and whatever is going to be owned by a yeshiva boy? Does God have a sense of humor or what? And that's why I hope and pray to God that the deal should go through and whatever. And at that point, all the discussions and they asked him openly in an interview this week, what's his incentive to buy it? The airline industry is financial suicide. He's putting $75 million into this thing. And he said, my incentive is to convert it into a glatt kosher airline that doesn't fly on Shabbat. God has a sense of humor. What all the politicians didn't do in the Knesset all the years with all their fights and scandals and stupidity, one yeshiva boy is going to do it a couple of bucks. It's a better way to solve the problem. I just wonder if now the non-religious will boycott Elul because it's owned by an Orthodox Jew. I wouldn't mind. I want to boycott it, go for it. It's not going to be empty. I'm not worried. At that point, even Satmar will fly Elul again. Everything will be fine. Yeah, who knows? Maybe one of these days you're going to get onto an Elul flight and you'll hear the pilot say, Be'ezrat Hashem, at this time we'll get to Israel. Or Baruch Hashem, we had a successful flight. It will be a very beautiful thing. I watched the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, speak today. Only because I had to see what's going on in his mind about what's going on in Israel, because it's starting to get a little bit uncomfortable. Because they went from being the most well-managed country to one of the most mismanaged countries very quickly. And I was extremely impressed how, as much as he can stick it in and get away with it, he used God's name. Now, I don't know if he did it for the right reasons or not. I have no idea. What I do know is, it's about time we have a prime minister in Israel who's proud to say Be'ezrat Hashem and Baruch Hashem. Unlike others that get up and say, it's all in our hands. And exactly that is going to turn around the situation in Israel to the good, and they'll make the comeback. Because once we say Be'ezrat Hashem, so Hashem ozer, Hashem at that point helps. So it's extremely important, Sheyesh Shem Shamayim, that the name of God should always be on our tongue. Thank God, yeah, thank God. Thank God for everything. Thank God that you made it, that you're okay, that you did everything. Thank God for everything. So let's go back to our Midrash. If you're in a jungle and you feel at home, it's bad news. If you're in a jungle and you feel like a loner, it's good news. That means there are loners that are in illness, because they feel alone in places that they shouldn't. But there are loners that are actually the most healthy thing. It's coming from an extremely healthy place. They're normal. And they can't feel connected to people that are not normal. And definitely not the animals that are a different breed, just for a practical reason. Comes to Midrash and says, Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jewish nation, Eicha esa levadi. Eicha esa levadi could either be read in the entire pasuk as one, and then it would mean, how am I supposed to carry you all? Or, if we put a comma, the same pasuk suddenly changes meaning. Eicha esa levadi. Factual. How am I going to do it? Meaning, that's what I plan on doing. I will carry your weight. Comes Moshe Rabbeinu and tells the Jewish nation, I was willing to take the hit for you. Not only that, I could have done everything for you. What went wrong along the way? Tochachem asachem v'rivchem. Your little fights, all the bigotry, all the stupidity along the way. As a result of that, I wasn't able to do what I had to do. Comes the Midrash and says, God tells the Jewish nation, if you would have had common sense then and got along with each other and done things right, you could have had Moshe Rabbeinu doing the Eicha for you. Now you're sitting Eicha Yashva Badad. You have to be isolated from the world in order to preserve some sort of recollection or remembrance to a Jewish nation. Very, very powerful Midrash. At that point, the Midrash makes a lot of sense. And we've quoted this from Rav Shach many times in speeches, that every time Klal Yisrael integrated too much with this, assimilated, I should say, not integrated. To be integrated in society is a great thing. But assimilated, physically assimilated, then God reminded them that they're Jewish and that nobody loves them. That's one of the many messages, maybe the most important message of Shabbat. On the surface, it looks like God's alone. He doesn't have his house, doesn't have most of the Jewish nation. Doesn't. In the depths, it's so not like that. God has his house closer to him, waiting eagerly to bring it back down to us. God has his children, even the ones that are very far away. The connection that Jews have to God today is very different than it was maybe in other times in history. But it didn't disappear. It may even exist more than ever. Just in a different way. It's playing out differently. And I encounter this day in, day out. Literally day in, day out. Not only that, even the goyim around us, when they see we're true to our values, they quickly respect them. It's an amazing thing. If we're wishy-washy ourselves, then they also laugh at it. But if they see that we're honest with ourselves and we're sincerely true about our values, Hashem put it into the world that they should concede to us. And at least, I don't say, we're not looking for converts. We don't, once I spoke somewhere in one of the universities, and I was wearing a kippah. So they knew I was Jewish. And I'm not embarrassed to be Jewish, very proud of it. And I said also a lot of Talmud quotes and other things. And at the end of the lecture, there was a Q&A, which is really why students come to lectures today. Nobody's interested in hearing what you have to say. They want to challenge you. That's their goal. And I like that. That's the more fun part of things. And so there was a whole bunch of the regular nonsense. And then towards the end, there was one kid who was, at least by his external look, didn't fit the bill of a country that Jews, at least historically, lived in, and identified himself as non-Jewish. And said, he says, you have such an impressive case. It's all Talmudic based. That means that the Talmud's brilliant. Why don't you travel the world promoting Talmudic values? You'll recruit so many more people to the Jewish faith. That was his question. I told him, first let me get done with all the Jews, then I'm going to start looking for you. It's said, I could barely get done with my own block. You want me to start looking for people all over the world now? But where did that come from? It came from a very pure place. Of a goy who was extremely pure and honest. When he saw something that was beyond human knowledge, he was like, wait a second, I also want part of this. Why am I left out of this? One person's going to walk into the Shabbat and he's going to fake some tears on his bank account. And for that, it would have been better he would have not had it to Shabbat almost. Yeah, of course, you have to keep the halachot, whatever. Meaningless, pointless. Another person will walk into the Shabbat and maybe won't cry. Because maybe he can't relate to that temple that was so many years ago. Maybe he won't cry because maybe he doesn't even understand what he's missing. And maybe he won't cry because his life is just too good in America. And they're all sad reasons. But he will do one thing. He'll say, this is not a day that's going to waste. I want to make a difference. We have a problem, there's no temple. What can I contribute to bringing the temple closer? And he'll be one of those who does something to spread love, unity, and the vision of the way the third temple is supposed to be. The Jewish values. It's visionaries who built the Jewish nation. It's visionaries who kept the Jewish nation going. And by the way, they were always in the minority. Avraham Avinu was called an Ivri because he was on one side and the whole world was against him. Right? That's how he got his name. We're Hebrews for that reason. That people that have common sense and speak truth are in the minority group is not a new thing. That was from the first day the Jewish nation was formed. Whether it started by Avraham Avinu or by Moshe Rabbeinu, whichever way you want to learn in the Rishonim, Moshe Rabbeinu was in the minority group as well. Aaron HaKohen's funeral had many more people than Moshe. Because leadership sometimes entails opposition. That's just part of the job. It would be a shame that the Shabbat should be wasted on counting down the minutes to eating. For that, just sleep through it. Sorry to say so bluntly. You want to fast, I beat a fast to say you fasted. So take strong sleep meds at the beginning of the fast and wake up at the end and have a good day. That's the point. That's what you're trying to accomplish over here. In my world, when you have a problem, you do something about it. You try to fix it. The only time you don't is if it's not in your hands. This is in our hands. So years ago, people used to make a mistake and say, it's not in my hands, because even if I do the right thing, and even if I take a step in the right direction, we need the whole Jewish nation to do it. Right? Because the Gemara says that if the Jewish nation would keep 2 Shabbats, miyadim nigalim, immediately they would be redeemed. That's true in the Bavli. But we know that the Maran, the Beit Yosef hold. I know Cham Ovadia doesn't completely agree with what I'm about to say, but Cham Etzion Bat Shaul, Rav Ezra Atiyah, many other poskim that were Cham Ovadia's rabbis did agree with this. When Maran had many Rishonim, but he had Divrei HaKabbalah, he was posek the halacha like the Kabbalah, even against many Rishonim. We see that by Hilchot Birkat Alvana, for example. Because he valued the opinion of the Kabbalah greatly, in a big way, above many poskim. He didn't just count them as another one of the poskim. There are many proofs to that. In the Kabbalah, the Zohar writes, all we need is knishta chada, 10 people, to do the right thing. What does it mean to do the right thing? The Zohar writes, to get along with each other. And immediately Mashiach will come. And if Mashiach didn't come until now, that means that we still can't get 10 people to get along with each other. I don't know. That's very embarrassing. I don't know what to say to that. I'm at loss of words when you use that analogy. Did we as a nation stoop that low that we can't even get 10 people? Knishta chada? Even that can't be done. So now, I don't even know if we need that anymore, because we're anusim on that too. Social distancing, everything has to be spread apart, so you can't even have a knishta chada. But it's important to think about it. And based on that, I want to conclude. Chazal say, Kol hamitabel al Yerushalayim, one who mourns for Jerusalem, zoche v'roeh b'simchata. We'll see it's rejoice, meaning Yerushalayim being rebuilt. Kol hamitabel, if you mourn, it should say yizke, will see. It says zoche, sees. Huh? Comes the Baditcheva and writes, if you mourn for the Churban Beit Hamikdash, that means that the Beit Hamikdash by you never died, it's still alive. Because Chazal teach us, Hamet mishtakiach me'alev, something that dies after 12 months you forget about. If a person dies, 12 months later, there's no more avelut. Why is there no more avelut? Because he's forgotten. Unfortunately, people today tend to forget even quicker. Kol hamitabel al Yerushalayim, if Yerushalayim still means something to you, zoche, that means you're a person who right now is already in exile, living on some sort of level of roeh b'simchata, of seeing the Simchat Yerushalayim. And here I want to end off with a thought that comes from Rav Shainim and Sefer, that has been the thought that consistently for 14 years Hashem gave me the zchut to end off my pre-Tisha B'Av class with. So this year will be no different, year number 15. Kol rodfea hisigua bein hamitzarim. Right, that's what we read in Necha. All those who try to fight the Jews, when was their most successful time? During Bein HaMetzarim. The luck of the Jewish nation is down during these 3 weeks. That's why in Halacha it says somebody has a court case with a non-Jew, he should push it off till after Shabbat. By the way, in Halacha it's brought down, you work less these days. Ma'atim ba'esek. There's no blessing in this money anyway. Definitely not a money that's earned on Shabbat. And many other things like that. That sounds scary. But again, we believe in eternal optimism. So listen to what so many Sfarim write. The word rodfea can either mean to chase, or we could split it. Rodef, chase, God. Kol rodfea, anybody who's rodef who chases God, meaning who looks for God, hisigua will reach him easily, bein hamitzarim, during bein hamitzarim. Why? Because when a king is not in his house, he's accessible. When a king's in his house, you need an appointment, and then another appointment, and then they cancel, and then they reschedule, and then it's very hard to get them. During these days, and the height of it is on the day of Tisha B'Av, God is in the streets available to anybody who's willing to reach out to him. To the point that Tisha B'Av has the parallel to Hosha'ana Rabbah, which on Hosha'ana Rabbah, Chazal say, Nitzchu Banai, that God announces in heaven that the Jewish nation won their victory in the heavenly courts. On Shabbat, God announces in heaven that we won whatever it is that we needed, on a condition that we stuck our hands out and reached out to him. Contingent to that. It's an opportunity. And to blow an opportunity like that will be very sad. So Be'ezer Hashem will go into this Shabbat b'chizuk, each one on his level, whatever he's holding by. B'simcha, even though it's Shabbat Chazon, doesn't contradict. With an extra effort, with an extra push, with an extra achdut. And b'vadai, if we'll do ours, Hashem will do his. And if we'll care and we'll show in action, day in, day out, how much we love the Jewish nation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will show us an affection that we feel. He shows us affection all day, we just normally don't feel it. So it shows an affection that we should actually feel. Each one, Bichlal Bifrat, there's a lot going on in the Jewish nation right now on so many fronts, including many Cholei Israel. I'm not talking about COVID. That's also a big problem, but thank God it's getting better overall. It seems like it at least. I'm not talking about numbers. Numbers is politics. I'm talking about the funeral homes aren't full right now, at least not in amongst our Jewish communities. But from other things, La'aleinu, cancer patients and many others. I'm not here to sit and list the whole sad story because it's just too painful. And all those that are struggling in other ways, that were affected in other ways, whether it's by what's going on now or in general, they were affected prior to this but for other things, have their own struggles and battles in life. These are all people that need Hashem's TLC, which He's giving them, they're just not feeling it. And kol rodfea, be a rodef yah, chase God in these days, he's sigua, and then you'll catch him bein hamitzarim during bein hamitzarim. And I conclude with a thought that you're entitled not to agree with. I give you that disclaimer in advance because this is unconventional thinking. But how do I gauge if I really love another Jew? I love you is said so frequently and easy that it's almost embarrassing to tell somebody today I love you. You tell the taxi driver, love you, this, love you. Everybody's a love you and a sweetheart and a this and a that. Get out of here. Words have no value anymore. When somebody told you thank you once upon a time, it actually meant something. Today, words have no value. I think I discussed this once. I was in a situation where I did a favor for somebody. And it was a relative of mine, my own daughter. And she told me, a stupid favor, whatever, the dad obligation. I don't consider these things a favor. I gave her a ride somewhere. And before she leaves the car, and then she was very young, she probably doesn't even remember this, she was at the beginning of her teen years, with the full teenage drama. Oh my God, Dad, I love you so much, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, and slams the door and goes running off to whatever she was going to do. Sounds familiar? I drove off, and something inside wasn't sitting well. Now, I should be the super proud dad at that point, no? I was such a wonderful child who was so grateful and so amazing and so perfect. Yeah, and then a few hours later I sat down with her, or spoke to her, and I told her, listen, your words will never have meaning in life. Don't destroy it before you started your life when you're so young. If for a 2-kilometer ride you say thank you 84 times, so what do you say for dad who pays your tuition? What do you say for dad who pays your way through college? What are you going to do? You're never going to be able to do anything in your life, because in proportion to the amount of thank yous that was, you're going to be on the phone 24 hours a day. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So learn that words should be measured, and sometimes less said is so much more said. And then your words actually carry weight. And if you use the same term for 3 different people, it carries no weight anymore. It's all fake. And you don't even realize it's fake. But it ends up, lip service. It's polite, it's nice, it's commercialized. So how do I gauge if when I say I love another Jew, it's just another one of these love yous, which today is not even a love you, became an emoji, or it's real? And if you'll ask 10 different people this question now, if I had to bet, 10 people will answer you 10 answers. And that's why I gave you a disclaimer. You don't have to agree with me. But here's my shallow measuring stick. I have a very complex, deep one as well for a different time. If I will do for you what I wouldn't even do for myself, there's a chance that I love you. Let me bring it down to practical terms, and being that we're in America, and in America our God is money, let's talk money. If I would walk into a shoe store and see a pair of shoes for $500 and tell myself, that's too expensive, I don't spend that type of money on shoes. But tomorrow I know you want $500 shoes and I'll buy them for you as a gift because you can't afford them and you really want them, then I know I love you. But if I'll say tomorrow, I wouldn't even allow myself to do it, why should I give it to you? I don't love nobody. Not myself and not you. That's my standard of Ahavat Yisrael. And again, this will make many people feel not at ease, because very few people can say they live up to that standard. But I don't think that's asking for much. I think that's the basics. I said many times, and I will say this as long as I live, my rabbi used to always tell me, if you can't afford to give it, you can't afford to buy it. When I buy something, I buy 2. One for me, and one for somebody who's a kollel student in need. If I can't afford 2, I can do without the 1. Now, is that an halacha? No. Is that a standard that everybody can live up to? Probably not. but at least be aware that something like that exists in this world and make an attempt to actually care. Make an attempt to actually think about other people's feelings and needs and wants, and even if they're just desires. And therefore, I have the most unique thing that I think exists right now in the whole world of giving, which some people think is insane, and I am so proud of it. Maybe that's why I'm so proud of it. August 2nd, Bezrat Hashem, with the help of a bunch of my friends, we will be sending at least 30, hopefully more, Kollel families on vacation for 5 days, fully paid, A to Z. Crazy, no? Give that money to Tomchei Shabbos. I have nothing against Tomchei Shabbos. I love all people that do good things. No, that's not crazy. August 2nd, I will not be going on vacation. But a kollel guy who just sat under these circumstances for 3 months, juggling kids at home, a wife not working, poverty, and God knows what else, and still learned Torah, deserves a break. And he deserves a break way before me. And therefore, I will make it my business to give him that break. And when I got to sell this to raise some of the funds for my friends, they don't bite. Initially, they're like, what? I'm not paying for somebody's vacation. That's crazy. And then when I explain to them, this is your way to prove Ahavat Yisrael to yourself, or at least some glimpse of Ahavat Yisrael to yourself, in 3 seconds, suddenly it makes so much sense. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. You're so right. Well, what's the question at all? I said I was ending a while ago. I really have to end because I have other things going on tonight. But I got to share with you one wild story from last summer. Last summer we did this in already. It was the second year. This is going to be the third year. So last summer we did this both in Israel and in the United States. This year we're only doing it in the U.S. because in Israel they're not allowed to go places. Whatever. There's a lot of restrictions. It's not applicable to do it in a safe way. So last summer when we did this in Israel, we closed the deal with a hotel in Tveria, and we took a block amount of rooms, 56 rooms to be exact. And we paid them for room and board on 56 rooms and sent a bunch of kollel families there. Then it was only 4 days, for four nights, 5 days. One of the prime donors of this project then, I'm saying the story, Lilu Nishmato, Lo Aleinu V'Lo Alechem, he's not alive anymore. He passed away young this year he was very sick then already, but he died of cancer about 7 months ago. And made this story be a Melitz Yoshanim from Shamayim. When I went to him initially telling him about my idea, he told me to say I'm insane was the nicest word he used. He said a lot of other harsh words. And I told him, are you willing to hear me out, or you just want to say what you have to say? Because if you want to say what you have to say, I'm done with hearing it, then I can leave, and we could stay friends. But if you want to hear what I have to say, maybe you'll hear another side to the story. He said, sure, I want to hear what you have to say. He was an Israeli. He lived in Israel. He's not alive anymore. He lived in Israel. Wealthy man. And I explained to my side to the story. And he heard it. And he was an honest man. And not only was he an honest man, he said, listen to me. I'm paying for the entire Tveria project. But do me a favor. I want to join as well. Because I want to see these precious people that learned that you just convinced me deserve this vacation and should be treated well. And I want to supervise myself, and that was even in his medical state, it wasn't good then already, that they have the best time of their life. So when you call to cut a deal, instead of cutting a deal on the 56 rooms that you said you want to take 10 more rooms for my family. My children, my married kids, whatever, this, that. Take 10 more rooms. I said, okay, as long as they exist. You know, various hotels are not that big because tourism is very hard. But if they exist, you got them. I'll be in touch with you. I made the phone calls, I worked it out. It turns out that the hotel didn't have the 56 rooms that we needed in the first place. So we ended up settling on taking whatever, I don't remember the exact numbers, whatever amount of rooms they had. And they provided us food and everything else and facilities for another place, which was some sort of inn that we took over for the rest of the people. This guy, being a wealthier person and not well, and wanting to be with his family, I assumed would prefer a more private, secluded, smaller place, and I placed him there. It was newer and nicer as well. The second day that they were there, his daughter's son, that was 2.5 years old, I guess in the crowd or in the family or whatever, lunchtime, disappeared. They realized a few minutes later, went into panic mode, started looking for him, couldn't find him, and suddenly see ambulances and medics running to a swimming pool. One of these Kolal guys that he paid for his vacation was swimming and saw a 2.5-year-old drowning and pulled him out of the pool and called Mada to save his life. His grandchild would have died if not for his act of charity. Hashem gave him a gift to see the power of Talmidei Chachamim and the power of what he did. And I just shared that story. You know what? It should be Lilu Nishmato, a legend in Chesed. You know what an Ayin Tova you have to spend so much money and to witness it. I spent all this money for all these people to have a good time. I think the last time in Jewish history there was somebody like that was maybe Rabbi Shai Kastir. He had a heart like that. But in today's generation, these things don't exist. A legend in Chesed, in that element. But it's more than that. When you're nice to somebody else, you're not being nice to anybody. You're being nice to yourself. Because life has the boomerang effect. What you do today, tomorrow affects you. You do good today, tomorrow you did good for yourself. It'll come back to do good for you. You did la'aleinu the opposite, the only person you hurt was yourself. So even for a selfish reason, be selfless. Sometimes being selfless could be the most selfish act in the healthiest way. And that's a very deep concept. So analyze it and think about it over the week. Because Baruch Hu should help that we should see binyan Beit Hamikdash, the tzarot of Am Yisrael b'chlal u'b'frat should end. Because Imo Anochi b'tzara, when a Jew is suffering, Hashem suffering with him. So we want Hashem suffering to end. Be'ezer Hashem will all be zocheh lekabel pnei Mashiach tzidkeinu b'simcha u'benachat b'mehera. Amen v'amen. Thank you very much. Have a good night.